Welcome to Grover Hill Zion United Methodist Church, Thursday evening devotions from the kitchen table. I hope this will be helpful to you tonight. But anyway, what's prompting this particular devotion tonight? I've been thinking about, it's not very doggone long and Easter will be upon us, won't it? Fourth Sunday of Lent coming up, fourth Sunday in Lent coming up. 2 more Sundays and Holy Week will be upon us with Palm Sunday. So it's rapidly approaching. And of course, during this time, we've been looking at events of Jesus leaving Galilee and heading toward Jerusalem to face the cross. And so we can't help think about Jesus' blood and how he gave it up freely for us. So I was thinking about this passage from Hebrews chapter 9, verses 9 through 19, which just says, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. And the author of Hebrews writes, when Moses had proclaimed every commandment of the law to all the people, he took the blood of calves, together with water and scarlet wool and branches of hyssop, and sprinkled the scroll in all the people. He said, this is the blood of the covenant, which God has commanded you to keep. In the same way, he sprinkled the blood both the tabernacle and everything used in its ceremonies. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, because without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Both the Old and New Covenants were put into effect by blood. The blood proved the death, thereby enforcing and enacting the will of the one who died. Again, that's Hebrews chapter 9, verse 17. And in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, it explains why the blood was used. For the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. So it was necessary for both covenants to be ushered in by blood. Because first it proved the death, because the blood is the life force. And secondly, it was given for atonement. So without it, there could be no forgiveness of sins. Jesus' blood was used to usher in the new covenant. His blood proved that death had occurred, thereby enacting his last will and testament, if you will. His blood was the price necessary for this will to come to pass. In other words, it put this covenant into effect. The new covenant is not only the will of Jesus, whose blood ushered it in, it is also the will of God the Father. Throughout Jesus' time on earth, he said over and over that his will was to do the will of the Father. In John chapter 6, verse 38. He stressed that what he said was only what the Father told him to say. And he did only what he saw the Father do. His words and teachings were not his own, but from the one who sent him. In fact, John chapter 6, verse 38 summarizes this whole concept very nicely, recording Jesus' words, "For I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." The writer of Hebrews starts chapter 1 of Hebrews declaring that Jesus is the exact representation of God the Father. Since they are one and the same, we can see that Jesus' blood was the life force that was able to usher in the will of God, which was the new covenant. Not only did Jesus' blood prove the death and put the covenant into effect, part of the new covenant that God spoke of through the prophets included the forgiveness of sins, and says the life force is in the blood, and this blood is used as a means of atonement, a means of forgiveness. So Jesus' blood then served multiple purposes. It enacted the will of the covenant, the will of this new covenant, and it was the cleansing agent of sin. If no blood were shed, there could not be any forgiveness of sins. So when we partake of Holy Communion, we are reminded that on that first Good Friday, Jesus suffered in great agony and died as his life's blood flowed freely down that old rugged cross to save you and me from our sins and wrongdoings and all who would believe in him for eternity, paying our debt that he didn't owe, that we couldn't possibly pay. Only he could pay the price for our sin. You could say he was a redeemer kinsman. Only one could redeem us. Only one could redeem us. And he did, and he has. Well, you think about that for a while and just have a great and blessed week.